I remember the exact moment the air in the room changed. It wasn't dramatic at first. No flickering lights, no sudden thunder, no shattered glass. It was subtle, the way a shadow enters a room long before you notice its owner. The dinner hall was warm, golden, filled with soft laughter and the clinking of glasses. It was the celebration of my mother-in-law's 70th birthday, a night she had planned for months, a night she promised would be unforgettable. Those were her exact words. And God, I wish they hadn't been. I stood beside Ethan, my husband, watching the way he kept adjusting his cufflinks, brushing invisible dust off his jacket, swallowing every few seconds like his throat was too dry to allow air. He'd been like that all week, restless, irritable, barely sleeping. When I asked him what was wrong, he muttered something about family pressure and tried to kiss me into silence. His mother, Eleanor Grant, was the definition of elegance. Tall, silver-haired, eyes like polished frost. She lived in a world where every sentence had two meanings and every kindness had a price. But tonight, she was quieter than usual, moving through the room as though she were searching for someone only she could see. When the moment came, she tapped her crystal glass with the tip of a knife. The room fell into perfect silence, like someone pressed pause on the world. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady, but carrying a strain that only those closest to her would notice. "Tonight is more than a celebration. It is a remembrance." Ethan stiffened. His hand, warm seconds ago, turned cold in mine. Eleanor looked around the room with a slow, methodical sweep of her eyes, like she was counting souls. When her gaze reached me, I felt something crawl up the back of my neck, something unseen, yet observing me with too much intent. There is someone missing tonight. Someone who loved gatherings like these. Someone whose presence, her voice trembled, has never truly left us. A murmur moved through the guests. Polite confusion mixed with discomfort. Ethan's jaw tightened. He stared at the floor. She lifted her glass slightly. "To my son, Gabriel." The room froze. I felt the name crash into me, even though I'd heard it before, a name Ethan avoided, a name no one in the family dared to mention, a name that lived in photographs stored away, in locked drawers, in stifled memories. Gabriel Grant, Ethan's older brother, the one who died, the one Ethan refused to talk about. Eleanor's hand shook slightly, wine trembling inside the glass. "I know," she said. "Many of you believe Gabriel left us years ago, but the truth is," she inhaled a brittle, broken sound, "Gabriel has never left this family." A whisper of confusion rolled across the tables. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, "She's finally losing it." But Eleanor smiled, cold, knowing, almost relieved. "Last night," she said, "Gabriel visited me." The room erupted. Gasps, nervous laughter, whispers. Ethan stumbled backward as though struck. I reached for him, but he pulled away, face pale, eyes wide with something worse than fear. I didn't know what frightened me more, her words or his reaction. Eleanor continued as though the chaos around her didn't exist. "He stood at the foot of my bed," she said, "just as he did when he was little. He told me he was ready, ready to show himself, ready to return." Her smile widened, and I felt the floor beneath me tilt. "He said someone in this room would help him come back." A chill slid down my spine. For a moment, the lights dimmed. Just a flicker, but enough to make everyone flinch. Ethan grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself, his breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. I leaned toward him. "Ethan, what is going on?" He didn't look at me. He didn't blink. He whispered one thing, barely audible. He wasn't supposed to say anything. His choice of words struck me like a blow. He, not she. Not my mother, my dead brother. I stared at him, my pulse hammering. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" But he wouldn't answer. He just kept whispering to himself, over and over, like a prayer or a curse. He promised he wouldn't. The guests were visibly uncomfortable now, shifting in their seats, glancing at the doors. Some were whispering about calling a doctor, others about leaving quietly. But Eleanor raised her hand and the entire room fell silent again, as though she had command over more than just people. "There is something else," she said softly. "Something I must reveal before he appears again." My skin crawled at the word appears. She looked directly at me. My heart stopped. "Emily," she said, her voice almost tender. "My dear daughter-in-law, it is time for you to know the truth about your husband and about the night Gabriel died." Ethan exhaled sharply, like a man drowning. "Mother, don't," he hissed, but his voice cracked. "Please, not here." But Eleanor only shook her head. "You've hidden the truth long enough," she said. "It's time she knew why Gabriel keeps coming back." Everyone was staring at me, and Ethan, and the empty space beside Eleanor's chair, where the shadows suddenly seemed too dense, too shaped, too present. Then Eleanor spoke the words that shattered the room. "Gabriel didn't die in an accident. He died because your husband made a choice, and Gabriel never forgave him." Ethan made a strangled noise. I felt the world tilt sideways. But Eleanor wasn't finished. "And tonight," she whispered, "Gabriel will finish what he began." A gust of cold air swept through the hall. The candles flickered violently. Somewhere, a glass shattered on its own. And then, in the far corner of the room, something moved. It was small at first, like a ripple in darkness, a distortion, a shape forming where no shape should be. Guests backed away, chairs scraping loudly across the floor. Someone screamed. Ethan whispered my name in a broken, terrified voice. "Emily, please, don't look." But I already was. And what I saw, or what I thought I saw, was the beginning of something that made the entire room feel too cold, too silent, too aware. A figure, a silhouette, almost human, almost familiar, watching us, watching him. But it was only the beginning. The figure in the corner didn't move, yet it felt as if the entire room shifted around it, bending subtly toward whatever presence lingered in that darkness. The guests, terrified, pressed themselves against the walls, whispering frantic prayers or cursing under their breath. But no one dared step closer. No one dared breathe too loudly. It wasn't fear of something they clearly saw. It was fear of something they could no longer deny. Eleanor's expression transformed. She looked relieved, almost serene, as if she had been waiting years for this moment. She raised her glass again, though her hand trembled so violently the wine sloshed over the rim. "You see?" she whispered, her voice soft, almost reverent. "He's here." Ethan clutched the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles went white. He shook his head, eyes fixed on the silhouette. No, not again." Again, The word sliced through me. "Ethan," I whispered, trying to pull him toward me. "What do you mean, again?" But he wouldn't respond. His breathing was shallow, panicked, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff with nothing beneath him. The shadows shifted. Not stepped, not walked. Shifted, like smoke rearranging itself into the shape of a person. The temperature plummeted. The candles dimmed to thin, trembling pinpoints of light. A pressure squeezed my chest, making it hard to breathe. Then the lights flickered once, twice, and the silhouette was suddenly gone. Gasps erupted. People cried out. Someone dropped a bottle. Chairs toppled. I turned toward Eleanor, expecting panic, but she was smiling. "He's ready," she whispered.
"Mother, stop it!" Ethan shouted, his panic turning into fury. "You don't know what you're doing." Eleanor turned her gaze slowly onto him. "Don't I? You're the one who invited him." Ethan's face drained of all color. "I never—" But Eleanor cut him off with a pointed, chilling calm. "You opened the door the night he died, Ethan, and every night since." My heart hammered so hard I thought it would burst. I looked between them, my husband, pale and shaking, and his mother, calm yet trembling with some mixture of grief and satisfaction. "What door? What are you talking about?" Neither answered, because in that moment the lights flickered again, plunging the room into brief darkness. When they came back on, a man stood behind Eleanor's chair. Tall, dark hair, wet clothing clinging to his form, dripping onto the polished floor. Eyes empty, yet burning with something between rage and sorrow. Gabriel. I knew it instantly. Even though I'd only seen him in a handful of faded photographs, his resemblance to Ethan was unmistakable. Same jawline, same sharp cheekbones, same haunted eyes. Except Ethan's eyes held fear of the living. Gabriel's held condemnation from the dead. Several guests screamed. One fainted. Another rushed to the exit, but the door refused to budge, as if held shut by an unseen force. Eleanor didn't turn to look at him. She didn't need to. "Welcome home," she whispered. Gabriel didn't speak. His chest rose with the gesture of inhaling, but no breath came. He lifted his head slowly, mechanical and trembling, as though every movement was pulled by strings. And then he looked at Ethan. The temperature dropped again, frost crawling across the windows in delicate patterns. "Don't," Ethan whispered, stepping back. "Please don't." Gabriel took one step forward. Water pooled beneath his feet, spreading across the floor in a slow, deliberate circle. The scent of lake water filled the air, cold, earthy, suffocating. My breath caught in my throat. Eleanor closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I knew you would return to him first." The guests pressed themselves against the walls, terrified but unable to look away. They were witnesses to something impossible, something sacred and horrifying. Gabriel lifted his hand. His fingers were pale, swollen, waterlogged, skin peeling around the nails, the hand of someone who had been underwater far too long. Ethan's entire body shook. "It was an accident, Gabriel, I swear, an accident." Gabriel's wet footprints approached him one by one. Each step echoed through the hall like the toll of a bell. Ethan stumbled backward until he hit the wall. Gabriel stopped inches away, and the lights went out. Screams filled the darkness. The air thickened into suffocating humidity, like being inside a drowning man's lungs. I reached for anything, Ethan's hand, a chair, the edge of a table, but my fingers grasped only cold, dense air. Then, a voice, barely a whisper, but close. too close. Emily. My name, spoken with a wet, gurgling sound, as though the speaker's lungs were filled with water. My knees nearly buckled. I spun around, trying to see something, anything. The lights flickered back on. Gabriel now stood in the center of the room, and in his hand, held gently, almost tenderly, was Ethan's watch. My stomach dropped, because Ethan was no longer beside me. I scanned the room frantically until I found him, on the floor near the wall, gasping, clutching his throat, like he was fighting for air. Gabriel looked at me. Not Ethan, not Eleanor. Me.
And the moment our eyes met, I felt something cold slide into my chest. A presence, an intention, an awareness. He mouthed something silently. At first I thought it was a name or a warning, but no, it was a question. Why? Before I could understand what he meant, the room plunged into chaos again, as people scrambled for the exits, screaming, crying, pushing against doors that still wouldn't open. And as Gabrielle slowly dissolved back into shadow, the water on the floor evaporating into cold mist, I realized one thing with horrifying clarity. He wasn't here for revenge. He was here for answers. And I understood, too late, that the truth about his death was nothing compared to the truth about why he returned tonight. I grabbed Ethan's trembling hand. "Ethan," I whispered, "tell me the truth. What happened to your brother?" His lips moved. No sound came. But the look in his eyes, it told me that the truth was worse than anything I'd ever imagined. Ethan's lips moved, forming broken shapes of words that refused to come out, as if something or someone was choking them back down his throat. His gaze darted around the room, searching for Gabriel, searching for a shadow he could bargain with, plead to, explain to. But Gabriel was gone. The air still carried his damp, suffocating presence, but the form, the shape, the impossible figure that had appeared behind Eleanor's chair had vanished like steam in cold air. Yet the water on the floor remained, a dark, spreading stain that refused to evaporate. "Ethan?" I whispered, leaning closer, trying to break through whatever invisible chokehold held him captive. "You need to tell me what happened. You need to tell me now." He grabbed my hand with a trembling grip, his skin ice cold, his pulse racing like a trapped animal's. Tears streamed down his cheeks, silent, violent, unstoppable. He shook his head, then nodded, then shook again, as though two forces inside him were fighting over whether the truth should be spoken. Eleanor stepped toward us, her gown brushing across the wet floor. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between grief, resolute, and a terrifying kind of serenity, as if she accepted what was happening not as a nightmare, but as a long-awaited destiny. "Emily," she said softly, "prepare yourself. The truth is not kind." "I don't care," I snapped, my voice breaking. "I'm done with riddles. I'm done with half-truths. Tell me." But Eleanor didn't answer. Instead, she turned to her son. "Ethan," she said, her tone gentle but commanding, "tell your wife what you told me that night." "No," he croaked, his voice raw. "Mother, please. You owe her the truth." But Ethan didn't look at her. He looked past her. His eyes widened in terror. "Elijah," he breathed. My blood ran cold. Elijah was Gabriel's middle name. I followed Ethan's gaze. There, near the staircase, stood the shadow again, human-shaped, still, waiting. Emily? Ethan swallowed, wiping his face with shaking hands. I didn't mean for Gabriel to die, but I wasn't the reason he became like this. Then who? I demanded. What happened? Ethan closed his eyes, as if preparing to relive something too heavy for memory alone. And then, finally, he spoke. That night, the night Gabriel disappeared, it wasn't an accident. He walked into the lake on his own. My breath caught. What? I whispered. Why would he do that? Because he heard something. Or someone. The air grew colder. Even Eleanor flinched. He said he heard Father's voice, Ethan continued, tears spilling again, calling him from the water. I stared at him. But your father died years before, I said, long before Gabriel. Ethan nodded slowly. Yes, and that's why he went to the water, to see if it was real. Silence settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. He told me he couldn't ignore it anymore, Ethan whispered. He said, if he's calling, I have to answer. I tried to stop him. I swear I tried. But Ethan broke off, his voice cracking. He whispered something to me before he stepped into the lake. I leaned closer. What did he say? Ethan shakily exhaled. He said, if I don't return, it's because one of us invited him back. A cold stab pierced my spine. One of us invited who back?
Ethan's face twisted with anguish. Our father. The scream that tore through the hall didn't come from any guest. It came from the house. The walls trembled, the chandeliers rattled, shadows curled along the floor like living things. Eleanor clasped her hands together tightly, knuckles white, expression collapsing from composure into desperation. No, she whispered. Not yet. Not tonight. The water on the floor rippled, slow, deliberate circles forming around the room. And then I heard it. A voice. Low, wet, hoarse, like a man whose lungs were filled with water. Eleanor. She staggered backward, choking on a gasp. Stay away from me. But her voice cracked, breaking on fear she had buried for decades. The guests screamed and bolted toward the exits again, but every door remained locked by an unseen force, rattling uselessly in their frames. The voice came again, this time closer, curling through the air like a cold breath on the back of my neck. You called me. No, Eleanor hissed. I never called you. You did. The lights blew out. Darkness swallowed the room. Someone screamed, high and sharp. Another voice sobbed hysterically. Glasses shattered as people stumbled blindly, crashing into tables and chairs. And then, a hand touched my shoulder. Cold, heavy, water dripping from its fingers. I froze, unable to breathe, my throat clamped shut. Slowly, so slowly, I turned. But it wasn't Gabriel standing behind me. It was a man I had never met, yet recognized instantly because I'd seen his portrait countless times in the Grant house. Tall, brooding, eyes dark enough to swallow the world whole. The father, Thomas Grant, dead for 15 years, yet standing inches from me. His lips parted, water dripped from them. His voice gurgled out in a whisper that rattled like stones underwater. You've come to finish what they started. My knees weakened, the world spinning. What do you mean? I stammered. But he didn't answer me. He looked past me, straight at Ethan. Son. Ethan fell backward, crawling away desperately. No, no, you're not real. You're not real.
Thomas stepped forward, each footfall leaving a puddle that spread unnaturally across the floor. His presence dragged the air down, pressing against our lungs, suffocating us with the weight of something ancient and unfinished. Thomas heard my voice, Thomas murmured, but it wasn't meant for him. Ethan shook his head violently. Please stop, please. Thomas reached toward him. It was then that Eleanor screamed, a raw, primal mother's scream that shook the entire hall. Leave him alone. She charged forward, grabbing Thomas's shoulder. Her hand passed through him like mist, yet he turned, acknowledging her touch as if it still carried weight. You lied, he whispered. You lied to me when I died, and you lied to them. Eleanor's breath hitched. I did it to protect them. Thomas leaned closer, eyes burning with something far worse than anger. You protected yourself. A ripple of cold swept through the room. Gabriel appeared again, this time standing directly behind his father, eyes hollow, expression unreadable. The dead were gathering, and the living were trapped between them. I grabbed Ethan's shoulders, forcing him to look at me. Tell me the rest, now. His voice broke as he whispered the words that shattered the last illusion of safety. Gabriel didn't drown because of Father's voice. Gabriel drowned because Father wasn't the only one calling. His eyes met mine. It was you, Emily. The world stopped. My breath froze in my chest, my thoughts scattered, my pulse vanished. What? I whispered, barely forming the word. What are you talking about? Ethan's hands trembled violently. You were there. The night he died, you were at the lake. Ethan, I wasn't even part of this family then, I began, panic rising. I know, he whispered, tears falling. That's why it doesn't make sense. He gripped my wrists. But Gabriel heard your voice, calling him. He told me. He said your exact name. Silence swallowed everything. My name. A voice. A death. A haunting. And something inside me, a memory or something darker, stirred. Because suddenly, I realized he wasn't entirely wrong. That night, years ago, long before I met Ethan, I had a dream of standing beside a dark lake, a dream in which someone whispered, Gabriel. And another whisper followed, a whisper that sounded like Emily. When her voice broke into a whisper, the room grew even colder, as if frost had brushed across everyone's skin. She stood there with her glass raised, her eyes empty, unfocused, staring not at the living, but straight through them. And before anyone could react, she said, He's standing behind her, just like that night. I felt pressure settle on my shoulders, as if an invisible hand gently, almost tenderly touched me. The guests looked around, searching for the person she was talking about, but no one saw anything. Only she did. And I. Because right next to my ear, slow and icy, came a breath. Too alive for the dead, too cold for the living. Then a faint chuckle, the same one that had torn our family apart a year ago. I froze, unable to inhale. She continued, her voice trembling. He never left. He was waiting for the truth to be spoken. Guests exchanged glances. Someone laughed nervously, trying to blame everything on age, medication, stress. But I saw what they couldn't. A shadow gliding across the wall, casting a silhouette that shouldn't exist. My husband stepped toward me,
pale as bone. "Let's go, now." His voice shook, though he tried to bury the fear under irritation. "You knew he didn't leave, didn't you?" I asked, feeling the truth claw its way up to me. He didn't answer. He only squeezed my hand so hard it felt like he feared I'd be dragged away in front of everyone. My mother-in-law, still holding her glass, whispered, "He came back for what belongs to him." And at that moment, the chandelier above us shuddered, as if someone ran a hand along its chain. Glass tinkled. The silence thickened, heavy as though the room itself was listening. I closed my eyes and saw him. My blood raced to my face. The same relative whose death had ripped our family apart. Not a hollow-eyed ghost, but almost real. Pale, jaw clenched, twisted by the bitterness he never released while alive. He was staring straight at my husband. And then I understood everything. His death wasn't an accident. He didn't leave on his own. Someone led him to it. My mother-in-law's words weren't madness. They were a desperate attempt to drag the truth into the light before time ran out. My husband turned away from the shadow. Too fast, too guilty. The floor dropped out from under me. The figure stepped closer, or maybe the air just grew denser. His voice brushed through my mind, cold and echoing. "She must know." The room went dark, as if someone tore the light out of it. Guests screamed. I only managed one breath. And then, silence. When the lights flickered back on, the shadow was gone, but my husband stood there like a man who had just heard his sentence read aloud. And I knew the talk he had avoided for years would begin tonight, and he would not be able to lie. Because sometimes the dead don't return for revenge. They return for the truth.